What's up, comrades? Welcome to the Left Side of Liberty. And before I get into today's video, I just wanted to correct some mistakes I made in the last video. So I'm going to do that right now. The first thing I want to say is I skipped over a couple of points in Umberto Eco's 14 Points of Fascism. And let me read the two that I skipped over. So I ended up in the previous video doing 12 points of fascism as opposed to 14. I was just rushing through it because I was kind of nervous because this is still a new channel for me and this is something that I haven't done in a while, so I was really nervous. And I just skipped over a couple. So I skipped over 8 and 9, which is the enemy is both strong and weak. That's number 8. So you see this a lot with Donald Trump in particular. I don't think you necessarily see this with Joe Biden, but you definitely see it with Donald Trump, where he'll say, he'll make fun of the radical left and he'll basically and Fox News does this too, and One American News Network, and like the far right news outlets will do this. They'll say, "Oh, the left, they're just these soy boy SJW, crybabies, and oh, these little triggered snowflakes," and then in the next breath they'll say, "Oh my God, look at the radical left! They're burning cities down, and they're tearing down all our institutions, and they're such a big threat, and oh, everybody be scared!" So that's according to Umberto Eco here, that is a feature of fascism, where you hype up the threat of your enemy, while at the same time, you overestimate and underestimate the threat of your ideological opponents. There we go. And this is something that Vosh, who I again reference on almost every video I do, this is something that Vosh references a lot. That is a feature of fascism, and he calls Trump out a lot for doing this. Where again, Trump will say, "Oh, look at the radical left. They're, a bunch of babies, and we're strong, here on the right. We're strong. We're tough, And look at these social justice warriors, these snowflakes on the left." And then he'll say, "Oh, they're criminals, and they're burning down cities, and they're tearing down statues, and they're gonna come to your house if you have a Trump flag, and they're gonna burn your house down, and all that kind of stuff." So again, that's overestimating and underestimating the threat of your ideological opponents at the same time. So that was the first thing. The second thing is pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. So basically, I think it's basically saying trying to make peace is siding with the enemy, which is actually something that the Democrats have gone after Trump for instance, with North Korea. That's an instance when Trump was trying to make peace with North Korea. You had the Democrats and you had the media say, "Oh, he's cozying up to dictators. Donald Trump is a dictator lover. He's cozying up to dictators." And to be fair, that's what some of the media, particularly Fox News, and the Republicans said about Obama when Obama negotiated the Iran deal. Like, "Oh my God, he's cozying up to Iran, and he's sucking up to terrorists." But it's funny. Nobody in either party says that when presidents in both parties suck up to Saudi Arabia. That's interesting. Nobody says that about Saudi Arabia. Gee, I wonder why. Anyway, but that's basically what number 9 is talking about, where fascists see any kind of negotiation for peace as weakness and an existential threat. So, like an existential threat to the nation. So, anyway, that was those were the 2 points that I missed in the last video. And another correction that I want to make, again, before I get into the topic of this video, is when I was listing fascist dictators, I accidentally said Allende, and I didn't mean Allende. Allende was actually a left-leaning leader in Chile who we actually overthrew, and we installed Pinochet, who was a fascist dictator. What I meant to say, who I meant to say, was actually Armas. Armas was a CIA-backed rebel who led a coup to overthrow the democratically elected government of Guatemala. So I got Allende and Armas confused. So that was my mistake, but I just wanted to clarify. I meant to say Armas, not Allende. So that was my fault. I had just mentioned Pinochet, so I think that's where the confusion came from. I had just mentioned Pinochet, so I thought Pinochet, Allende, so I got confused. I really meant Armas in Guatemala. So now that we got that cleared up, the topic that I wanted to talk about for today's video is I'm going to go through the political compass test with you guys. And I was inspired to do this video because a couple of the Daily Wire guys have done it, and it's hilarious watching them go through it and struggle through it. It's hilarious. Ben Shapiro, who everybody knows, he's done it, and Michael Knowles has done it. And it was actually more insufferable watching Michael Knowles take it than Ben Shapiro. I mean, Ben Shapiro was bad enough watching him take it because, I mean, both of them, it was the same basic premise in both their videos. Both Michael and Ben think that some of the questions were part of this, like, big leftist conspiracy to, like, own conservatives, when they were just asking you basic questions. It was not some grand leftist plot to out conservatives. It's like, these guys are such babies. They love playing the victim. Don't ever let conservatives tell you, oh, it's just the left that plays the victim. I mean, there are some SJW lefties that love playing the victim. I will definitely agree with that, but don't let the right fool you. They love playing the victim, probably more than anybody on the left loves playing the victim. These guys crave the opportunity to play the victim. Oh my God. I mean, have you seen, like, any MAGA person ever? They love playing the victim. They love pretending that Trump is a victim. Meanwhile, he's the goddamn president. He's by definition not a victim. I mean, yeah, okay, the media's not that great to him. Big deal. He's the president. So what? So what if the media's not that great to him? He's the president. Get over it. Oh my God. But anyway, it was really, really funny watching Ben and Michael take their political compass test and just unbelievably cringe at some of the questions. They were really uncomfortable at some of the questions. So I've taken the political compass test many times, and but I've never made a video on it. I've never videoed myself taking it. So I wanted to video myself taking it and then share my results for YouTube, so I can finally have my results out there for, anybody to see. And I would like to just walk through the questions and talk them out and explain my reasoning. And so it's just going to be a real fun video, and I can explain uh, my philosophy and sort of, again, my reasoning behind the answers that I give. And yeah, it's just going to be a pretty fun, pretty light video. I was going to do um, some more video analysis. I was going to do possibly a PragerU video for this week, but I've already done one of those, so I didn't want to do too many at one time, like too many in a row. So I just thought, yeah, I may as well do a political compass video. So that's what I'm gonna do. So yeah, let's get to it. All right. Let's begin with the first page here. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Strongly agree. And that should be obvious to anybody with a modicum of empathy, because corporations are institutions and humans are humans, and humans should help each other, and they should care more about helping each other than helping institutions. Whoops. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Strongly disagree. I think that nationalism, in some ways, can be a good thing, but I think the concept of a nation state itself is very self-destructive and tribalistic, almost necessarily. So, since I don't agree with nation states, I don't necessarily agree with supporting a country just for the sake of supporting a country. I agree with supporting your fellow countrymen, but not necessarily a country or a government. No one chooses their birth country, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Strongly agree. I think it's okay to be fortunate that you're born in some places over others. Like, am I fortunate to be born in America as opposed to, say, I don't know, Iran or let me think of another, or North Korea, for instance? Yes, but am I proud am I proud to be an American? No. In the words of George Carlin, pride should be reserved for things you achieve or attain on your own, not something that happens to you by accident of birth. That's a quote from George Carlin. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Strongly disagree. That one I'm not even going to bother going over because it's just self-evident that racism is just dumb and makes no sense. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Strongly disagree, because the enemy of your enemy is oftentimes still just as much an enemy as your other enemy. So, nope. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Ben Shapiro definitely agrees with that. So, strongly disagree. I think you have to follow international law because we, as Americans, we are not above the law. We have to follow it just like everybody else. So it's funny how the law and order people, they're all of a sudden they're fine with disobeying the law when it's international law, when it's within our own borders. Oh, law and order, you have to do exactly what the cops say when they say it. But when it's international law, we don't have to follow it. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I would agree with that because actually, I would say strongly agree because I think that like the media is a perfect example. You have an example of you're supposed to be getting information and news, and the news that you're getting is heavily biased in favor of the establishment, so it's not very factual to begin with. And the other news that you get, so you get 2 minutes of that, and then let's spend 5 minutes on, what brand of panties Kylie Jenner is buying this week. So, yes, there is a worrying fusion of uh, information and entertainment, if you can even call it information nowadays. Anyway, next page. Um, People are ultimately divided by class, more by class than by nationality. Strongly agree. I think that ultimately even though I'm not necessarily a Marxist, as I've said before, I have a lot of disagreements with Marx, but in this sense, he's right that a lot of human history is essentially a battle between classes, and not necessarily a battle between nationalities. And nationality and ethnicity, and it plays a factor, but class is probably a bigger factor, and that's what this is alluding to here. So, controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. This is a question that I've struggled with a lot. Um, hmm. I I'm gonna say, well, I guess in the context of, huh, in the context of the capitalist economy, some unemployment is actually good for the economy. So, and inflation, I guess in some ways, I would actually kind of agree. Uh, I mean, as bad as unemployment is, I think you would have to give, I believe in a social safety net for unemployment. Um, but yeah, I think I would slightly agree with that. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I strongly agree with that. I don't think you should regulate them to the point that it's going to hurt the workers or hurt the consumers, but some basic marketplace regulations, so that you make sure the companies aren't polluting the airways or polluting rivers or streams, I think are necessary. So, yes. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Again, I'm not a Marxist, so I'm going to have to slightly disagree with that because um, I think, uh, what if the need of a community exceeds the a person's ability to produce? So I think you would have to find a way to compensate for that. Like, for instance, now we have things like 3D printers and stuff. So I guess, yeah, I guess I just don't know if I agree with that, with that exact principle. Um, the freer the market, the freer the people. I would agree with that if I didn't think it was talking about free markets as a like in terms of capitalism. I think that's what it's talking about here. It's framing free markets as capitalism, whereas I think it should be framing uh, free markets as actual free markets. Capitalism, in reality, has nothing to do with free markets. It's not about free markets. Um, there are freed markets in socialism, in market socialism. So if it said something about freed markets, I would agree with that. But if we're talking about a capitalist free market, um, I would, I don't know. So I guess I would agree if we were talking about market socialism, but if we're talking about a capitalist free market system, then no. So I wish this button here had agree if we were talking about market socialism, but so I'll just tentatively put agree for this one. It is a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Strongly agree with that. Now, I'm not necessarily like, I think there is room for, like, if somebody wants different flavored water or whatever, I think it's okay. But I guess just the idea of, oh, I need some basic drinking water, um, and I need to pay for it, that concept is just so insane to me. So the basic idea is almost barbaric to me. So yes, I would tend to agree with that. Um, so yeah, because it even says basic here. So I agree with, like, I have no problem if people want like vitamin water or flavored water, like in an anarchist society. If somebody wants to sell that, whatever. But the idea of selling basic drinking water and making profit off of that, just no. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly agree. You shouldn't deprive somebody of land and shelter just because they can't pay for it. That's ridiculous. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Strongly agree. It sucks that people like Mitt Romney just sit on their asses all day counting money. Meanwhile, there are millions and millions of workers in this country who actually manufacture goods, and they can't afford to pay their rent. They can't afford to keep the lights on. They can't afford to feed their families. And meanwhile, again, Mitt Romney can afford a fucking elevator, like a car elevator. But again, these people that work these manufacturing jobs, they can't pay the rent. They can't pay the bills. They can't pay to feed their kids. They can't pay to send their kids to college. I mean, this is insane. But anyway, the only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Strongly disagree. A company should have way more social responsibility than that. The reality is that as of right now, that's pretty much their only responsibility, but they should have more social responsibility than that. The rich are too highly taxed. Strongly disagree. They need to pay a hell of a lot more. Now, I know what the conservative argument to that is. Well, don't they already pay a lot? I mean, technically on paper, yes, but there's loopholes and deductions, and they set up all these charities so they can write that off on their taxes, and so there's ways that they can weasel their way out of paying taxes. And then, of course, there's offshore tax havens. There's many ways they can weasel out of paying their taxes. And under Trump, the middle class and the poor were actually paying a higher share of taxes than the rich were paying. So, how's that for, the rich pay a higher share of the tax burden and blah, 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 blah. Those with the ability to pay should have higher access to standards of medical care. Strongly disagree. Everybody should have the same access to high quality health care. Absolutely. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I'm not really sure if the government should be responsible for that. I mean, consumer activism is hard, especially since you have corporations on top of corporations on top of other corporations now. But I don't know, mislead the public. I mean, maybe there should be fines. I guess so. Genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. If we're talking about capitalism, then absolutely, that's what Teddy Roosevelt did. I have many criticisms of Teddy Roosevelt on foreign policy, but on domestic policy, some of the stuff that he did was actually pretty good, including antitrust laws. Now, there are some even anarchists that oppose antitrust legislation, and I see their point. I see the point of anarchists opposing antitrust laws, but I'm on the side of antitrust laws, just as a measure to make sure. I skipped a question here. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I agree, as long as even Adam Smith agreed with that. As long as, again, it doesn't hurt the workers or consumers. Some measure of protectionism is necessary. On to page 3. But anyway, Teddy Roosevelt did implement some antitrust legislation, and I support that. Anyway, real quick here. Abortion, when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. This is one area where I'm actually slightly on the conservative side. Sorry for my scrolling here. So I'm going to slightly agree with that. I think that in some cases, if it's early enough, I think abortion should be allowed, as long as you don't have to, like people who are against it aren't forced to pay for it. So that would be my answer to that question. But I would be very, very strict on late-term abortions, unless, as it implies here, unless it's a medical necessity and it needs to be done in order to save the life of the mother. So, all authority should be questioned. Strongly agree. I'm an anarchist. An eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Nope, I'm an anarcho-pacifist, so I strongly disagree with that. Just because somebody does something to you doesn't mean you have a right to do it back to them. You should be the bigger person, and you should be more principled than that. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I used to, when I was in my sort of ANCAPy phase, I kind of agreed with this, but now I actually work for a nonprofit arts organization, so it would be kind of hypocritical for me to not agree with this. I will definitely change my tune on this, and I will say that it should be definitely supported because people need the arts, man, and I would say actually strongly agree on this. I would. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. I'm not a big fan of homeschooling, but yeah, I kind of agree with that. Sorry. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. No, that's stupid. Strongly disagree. People should experience all kinds of different cultures. That's what I did. I grew up in a very rural area where there's not much diversity. There's a little bit, but not much. And once I got to college, I experienced all kinds of different cultures, and I loved it. And I have friends, all different backgrounds, all different races, religions. It was great. So, and it made me a much better and much better, much wiser, much more well-rounded, I guess, person. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. No. If you have to use corporal punishment on their children, it means your reasoning skills suck. So, it is natural for some children to keep secrets from their parents. True. I strongly agree with that because sometimes kids do keep things from their parents. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Strongly agree. I personally have only smoked once, but and it didn't really do anything for me, to be honest with you. But I support people's right to do it if they want to. Toke it up, man. It's no big deal to me. It's your business, not mine. So, primary function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. That's pretty fascist. Strongly disagree. No, the purpose of schooling should be to educate kids and to teach them how to think critically and to question everything. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Strongly disagree. That's quite ableist. If people actually think that. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. No. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept other people for the way they are and to treat everyone with love and respect. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have a right to discipline your children. You should discipline them in some way, but you don't have to use corporal punishment. And that doesn't mean that you should let your kids walk all over you. No, you shouldn't. But you do need to lay down the law with them, like I said, in some form or fashion. But you should also teach them to be loving and responsible and respectful. There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. I would mostly agree with this one, although I go back to the example of like Saudi Arabia in the sense that although I don't believe that most Saudi Arabian people are savage, I wouldn't say that. I do believe that the government has fostered a culture that is very, very backwards and wrong. And same thing again with North Korea and just a lot of places like that that are very authoritarian and again very backwards. And but for the most part, I agree with the statement: there are no savage and civilized people, only different cultures. I agree with that. And a lot of times, the people that claim to be the most civilized are also very savage. Like neo Nazis, for instance. They're like, oh, we're the civilized people. No, you're pretty fucking savage. So, those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I actually disagree with that because I think everybody has a right to the basic necessities. I don't think they have a right to a mansion. I don't think they have a right to a limo. But I think they have a right to a basic stipend of material well-being, despite not contributing to society. I still think they should be treated with a basic level of decency. So when you are troubled, it is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. No, I think this is the problem with a lot of conservative thinking, and liberals too. Liberals, I think, tend to do this a lot too. I think it's better to deal with it and move on than just put it off and let's think about something else. No. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. No, I think it is possible, actually. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Strongly disagree. Nope. It's usually the opposite. Nope. Broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Disagree. I think public broadcasting is pretty important, and I think it should continue to a certain degree. All right. So now we have our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Strongly agree. The NSA is dog shit. It's just the Patriot Act is a disaster, and it's funny how some of the same people that cry about freedom and government transparency and blah, 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 blah have nothing to say about the government spying on all Americans. That's just insane to me. Anyway, moving on, shall we? A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. I mean, a one-party state, I suppose, is more efficient in the sense that you don't have warring factions fighting with each other, but I would rather have a democratic process than a one-party state. So, I mean, it's not necessarily an advantage. I think a democracy is more advantageous than a one-party state, at least when the people are involved. So I am going to say strongly disagree because I hate authoritarianism. So, although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. That is horseshit. Strongly disagree. Everybody should be worried about the growth of the surveillance state. I mean, look what's happening in China with their social credit system. I mean, good God. You don't think that can happen here in the United States? I mean, we're well on our way. So, the death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. This is an issue where I've actually been on both sides, where I used to be in favor of the death penalty, but now I'm against it, especially since I know that it disproportionately is used against black people. Um, it's definitely used in a racist fashion, and we kill the wrong people 4% of the time. Maybe if we didn't have those factors, it would be okay, but I'm still just the concept of the state getting to put people to death. I don't know. It's just not right to me. So I'm going to have to strongly disagree with that. Um, in a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Strongly disagree. I'm an anarchist. We are perfectly fine. We're going to be perfectly fine if we have non-hierarchical, horizontal societies as opposed to vertical societies, pyramidal societies with people at the top. Because eventually the people at the bottom that are holding up the top are going to realize how badly they're getting screwed over by the people at the top. And we need a more horizontal structure so that everybody has a chance to thrive, and the people at the top can't take advantage of you anymore. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Strongly disagree. Who the hell are you to decide what is art and what isn't? PragerU actually did a hilarious video on this. I think it was called "Why is Modern Art So Bad?" And it was literally this art professor whining about modern art. And I mean, there are a couple of points in the video that I actually thought were kind of decent. Like why are people paying, I think it was like 30 million or maybe $3 million for a rock? Like, really? You're going to pay that much for a rock? Or, $100,000 for a white painting? Like, you really want to pay that much? So I get it, but you can't say that isn't art. It's a commentary on how absurd some paintings are with how much detail they go into. Now, the people that painted those paintings are very talented, but you can't also dismiss the commentary as not art. No, that it's a statement that sometimes simple is better. So anyway, yeah, abstract art is definitely art. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. No, rehabilitation should always be the goal of criminal justice, because if you're just punishing people, what's the point? Do you just get a kick uh, out of hurting other people? Like, if that's the case, how are you any better than the criminal? Um, so no, we should always try to rehabilitate criminals so we can reintegrate them into society and make them better, more productive people. Um, it is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. Now, this part I actually agree with, because there are people like serial killers, and people that are just too far gone, but I still think that the vast majority of criminals can be rehabilitated if we have enough resources dedicated to rehabilitation rather than just punishing them. So and this is why in a lot of other countries their recidivism rates are much lower than ours. Our recidivism rate is out of control because in this country we spend a hell of a lot more time on punishment than we do rehabilitation, and that's the problem. So anyway, the business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Strongly disagree, because I'm a writer and an artist, so I'm a little bit biased. But I'd say that they're both equally important. So, and I'd in fact go further and say that, well, they both have equal value as people, um, but I'd say that the writer and the artist, I'd say they have equal value as people, and I guess I'd just leave it at that. Um, okay, so moving right along here. Moving right along, mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I think that one of the main duties of mothers, of actual mothers, should be to raise children. But if they want to have careers too, that's totally fine. I disagree with the whole notion of like the whole conservative tradcon notion of no, the only duty basically of women is child rearing and raising a child, and basically the duty of a woman is to raise a child and take care of their husbands and clean up after them, and just do that until you die. It's like, nah, they can have careers. I say there needs to be uh, a balance, so I would disagree with that. I'd say there needs to be a balance. So anyway, multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. That is true, because multinational companies often exploit not just the plant genetic resources, but they exploit a lot of resources from developing countries, and they screw over developing countries in many ways. So that is absolutely true. This is a good one. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Strongly disagree. Thinking for yourself. That is a big aspect of maturity. In fact, showing respect is a an aspect of maturity that is very important. But making peace with the establishment, like just going along to get along, that's conformity, and that's pretty much immature. Thinking for yourself, that's mature. That's empowerment. That's that's having a sense of self worth, and having self confidence in your own thoughts. So I would strongly disagree with the statement making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I think it's the complete opposite. But I'm just a dirty, rotten anarchist. So what do I know? Anyway, next page. So we got page 5 of 6 here. So this will be mostly on religion, as you can see. Astrology accurately explains many things. That is false. Strongly disagree. I totally support people's right to believe in astrology, but for to actually believe that astrology accurately explains many things, I just totally disagree. Um, anyway, you cannot be moral without being religious. Strongly disagree. It's so funny that there are a lot of people in this world that that they claim to be the most religious, and you find in a lot of instances that they're actually the most immoral. These people that claim that they're the paragon, the acme, the height of morality, are actually the most deeply immoral people on the planet. So I would strongly disagree with that. I think some aspects of religion, like if you follow the actual, never mind the recycling truck in the background, if you actually follow the teachings of Jesus or the teachings of Buddha or any of these spiritual or religious figures, then I think you're pretty good because um, these guys really have a lot of good messages. But if you're like a fundamentalist, usually you're a pretty shitty person. And I'm sorry to say that, but usually you're just not that great of a person as you claim to be. Again, the most moral and virtuous person in the world, you know? So, anyway, moving on. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Um, that's a tough one. In theory, I suppose, but in reality, um, I think we need Social Security. I, I think it's a little bit more reliable, honestly, than charity because a lot of times charity can be a scam, and I just don't trust charities with really actually providing the things that people need, whereas Social Security is actually a pretty good program and has been proven that it can help with improving the material conditions of genuinely disadvantaged people. Yes, the programs can be abused, but Social Security fraud and welfare fraud is not even close to the problem that conservatives make it out to be. It's a very, very minor problem. It is a problem, but it's a very minor problem. And Social Security is actually quite solvent. Um, and we don't need to do all this cutting and quote unquote reforming of Social Security. It's actually in pretty good shape, at least for a while. Again, Social Security is not ideal, but it's certainly better than charity, so I'm going to strongly agree with that. Some people are naturally unlucky. I would say it depends on your circumstances. This is like a nature versus nurture argument, I think. I would say it depends on your circumstances rather than nature. Um, but I guess, I mean, like, sometimes you're just born into situations that, I don't know, this is a really tough one. Uh, some people are more unlucky than others, though. Um, and some people that should probably have bad luck often get away with some really, crazy, not so good, not so good stuff. But yeah, I think I'd slightly agree with that actually. It is important that my child's school instill religious values. Strongly disagree. I would hope that my child's school instills moral values, but not necessarily religious values. I would hope that my school would teach my kid empathy and compassion and tolerance, but I would not want them. Uh, I would welcome the school educating my kid about religion. I would welcome them. Like I learned uh, about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. We learned about the basics in my high school social studies class. We got a basic rundown of the major world religions. That I'm totally fine with. But as far as instilling those values in my kids, no, I'm not okay with that. So, anyway, moving on to the last page. Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. This is another one where my Catholic upbringing kind of brings me into conflict with my sort of lefty sensibilities, because the lefty part of me is like, who cares? It's not great that you have sex outside of marriage, but on the other hand, marriage is just a piece of paper from the government essentially. So sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. But on the other hand, marriage, you're making a commitment to somebody, and sex outside of that is a huge act of disloyalty to me, and loyalty is uh, a huge part of who I am in terms of a character trait that I value significantly. So I don't know. Usually immoral. Hmm. But if it but if it means like cheating, I would say disagree. But if it's saying sex outside of marriage, like if you're just boyfriend and girlfriend, um, or like if you get drunk and you're just making a mistake and you just, I don't necessarily see that as immoral. I see that as, oh, you just messed up. Or if you just want to express, your love to your partner, if you're just boyfriend and girlfriend, I don't see that as immoral. So I'm going to say disagree with that. Because I don't think they're necessarily talking about cheating. So again, if they specifically said cheating, then I would say, then I would agree it's immoral. But I don't think they're necessarily saying that here. So disagree with that. Same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Strongly agree. I think having a two-parent household with two stable incomes, I think that's much more important than this whole, oh, you got to have two parents of two different sexes. I think that is very, very overrated. Like this whole nuclear family thing, because not too long ago, the nuclear family, I mean, the nuclear family is a relatively new thing. It was relatively common in the not too distant past to basically be raised by tribes and your neighbors and different clans, so to speak, and tribes, and different townspeople, and this idea, this conception of the nuclear family is a relatively new thing, that's really only a few hundred years old. Um, it's not something that is something that we've always done, like conservatives act like it is. It's like, it's pretty new. So, anyway, pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Strongly agree. What goes on in the bedroom, again, between two consenting adults, including viewing two consenting adults, is none of the business of the state. And which is actually the next question. Yes, what goes on in a private bedroom between two consenting adults is no business of the state. Yep, strongly agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Strongly disagree. Even in non-Homo sapien animals like us, like humans, homosexuality can be can occur. So it is a natural phenomenon. It's not common, but it is a natural phenomenon. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I'm going to actually strongly disagree with that, because in a lot of red states, for instance, there are people that shelter their kids way too much from talks about sex. And like my parents talked with me about sex from a very young age, and it helped prepare me for for just being very careful, very cautious. And I and I'm a very gentlemanly person, and that's all because of just the way I was raised. And in a lot of conservative households, you don't really have that preparedness. The parents don't prepare their kids, and then they get into high school and college, and they don't know what the hell they're doing, and that can get them into a lot of trouble. And then you build up resentment toward your parents, and then just turns into this whole shit show, and everything just goes to hell. So, anyway, let's see where I stand as a result of the test that I just took today and the answers that I just gave today. Oh, okay. Cool. So, see everybody? I'm not necessarily as left as certain people would believe. And yeah, so there you have it. Yep. At least for this test. And actually, um, there's if you go further down, they'll actually give you a certificate where you can type your name in, and you can see where you match up with, roughly speaking. They even tell you that these uh, people that they put in here are arbitrary. Like, for instance, with Donald Trump, for instance, um, there was an instance where did they have they used to have Hillary Clinton on here somewhere. I don't know where she is, but I think they put Hillary Clinton to the right of Donald Trump, and it was like, what? Like, he's bad, like, or she's bad, but there's no way Hillary Clinton is to the right of Donald Trump. That's a little bit too far. But but they must have changed this for like the 2016 versus 2020 kind of political figures. And as you can see with me, I'm pretty much right with, at least on this chart, I'm pretty much right with Noam Chomsky. Surprise, surprise. So, anyway, and I'm not that far, again, at least according to this chart, from Emma Goldman, who I love and respect. So, anyway, the political compass, there's a lot of issues with it. It's not all that great, to be honest with you. But it's a fun thing to do, like when you're bored, especially. Um, it's like, for instance, I really disagree with the authoritarian left axis because, and maybe this is a video, an idea for a future video. I think the sorry about that. With the left-right scale that I use the terms left and right in their original definition, which is just after the French Revolution. In the French Estates General, which was essentially their equivalent of a parliament, they were deciding where to take their country after the French Revolution, and they had a choice to make. They could either go in a more democratic direction, or they could continue the monarchy that they had. They could continue the monarchy that they had just fought against, or some of them had just fought against before the French Revolution. So there were overlap on both sides. There was overlap on both sides, but generally speaking, those who favored the monarchy and hierarchy, they sat on the right side of Parliament, of the Estates General, and those who favored a more democratic and egalitarian system sat on the left. And some of them even favored capitalism, actually, which is interesting. But at the time, I don't blame them for thinking that capitalism would be a more democratic system, because capitalism was still a relatively new thing at the time. So, like I said, I can't really blame them. But, but obviously today, leftism is associated more with anti-capitalism. And even back then, it was somewhat associated with anti-capitalism, but there were some people in the on the left side of the Estates General in France that were pro-capitalism. But anyway, the point is, that's what I use. That's the spectrum I use. So when I say left and right, I'm talking about lefties oppose hierarchy and authority, and people on the right are in favor of hierarchy, authority, law and order, things like that. So that's why I'm saying people like Mao and Fidel Castro and Stalin, they should be considered on the right, because they were in favor of a very rigid hierarchical system, and they were in favor of a state which by its nature is rigid and hierarchical and is a monopoly on the use of force. So I think they should be considered right wing as opposed to left wing. And there wasn't even egalitarianism in these supposedly leftist states, because the elites had all the control. The vast majority of citizens were equally miserable and equally poor, but there was a tiny elite class at the top that enjoyed all the spoils. That's not egalitarianism. That's elitism. That's not egalitarianism. So don't fall for the right wing framing on this. Anyway, so these guys are what we would call tankies, and what tankies are the quote unquote lefties. They're painted as lefties, but really they're essentially fascists that are pretending to be lefties. That's basically what they are. They're fascists with slightly left-leaning arguments, essentially. They're fascists who appropriate leftist rhetoric. So, anyway, that's the political compass test. Not the best test in the world, but still fun to do when you're just bored and you want to get a general sense of where you stand on politics. on political issues and where you generally fall on the spectrum. So, anyway, just thought I'd share that with you guys today. And yeah, hope you had fun. And I will see you guys next time here on the Left Side of Liberty. Until then, take care.